but bright spells later. Meanwhile, keep listening to all...
We interrupt this program to bring you an important announcement. An accident occurred at 11 a.m. this morning in Midhaven, which involved a nuclear weapon. There is no risk of an atomic bomb-type explosion. There is a risk of a hazardous dust cloud made up of very fine dust particles being carried downwind. People in the following areas, Fensham, Norvale and Fenton, should take these precautions to minimize the risk of breathing hazardous dust particles. Go indoors and stay there. Do not try to collect children at school unless told to do so. The school authorities will look after them. Close all doors and windows. Switch off any ventilation or air conditioning system. Do not leave the shelter of a building unless requested to do so by the emergency services.
That wasn't a comedy or a macabre shock horror story from the Ban the Bomb mob. That was the script for a government radio announcement to be used in the event of an accident involving nuclear weapons on British roads. About 5 years ago, I found out that nuclear warheads travelled past one of Europe's biggest shopping centres, the Gateshead Metro Centre, across the Tyne and through my city of Newcastle. In fact, along this very road here. Military convoys, like this one on the A1, regularly transport nuclear weapons by road all over Britain. But how safe is this? Like most people, I thought that nuclear weapons stayed in their bases or on submarines. They don't. The contents of nuclear warheads deteriorate and have to be overhauled about every 2 years in a special factory. You might call it a 12-megaton service. So practically every week of the year, weapons are transported by road in large convoys, often through densely populated areas. They travel to and from nuclear bases all over Britain, along the M8, A1, M1, M6, M25, M4, M5 and other roads to Burfield Atomic Weapons Establishment near Reading, the place they were made. But we're not meant to know that Burfield exists. In fact, it's such a state secret that it's now been removed from the Ordnance Survey map. This convoy set off from Burfield on a Tuesday morning. It's now 8:30 Thursday morning and it's leaving its overnight stopping off point near Newcastle to travel the last leg of its journey to Faslane, the nuclear submarine base near Glasgow. These are the warhead carriers. There are 4 in this convoy. They carry the most deadly load on British roads. Imagine combining the purest radioactive material with high explosives. That's the lethal cocktail these wagons carry. This is the fire tender. The white vans contain armed RAF commandos. One nuclear bomb contains about 7 kilograms of plutonium and other radioactive materials and enough high explosives to make a 50-metre crater. These lorries could be carrying up to 4. But what are the dangers of transporting these weapons by road?
I think it has to be emphasised, there is no danger at all of an atomic explosion. The ingredients just aren't there. And I think that it's very easy for the public to suddenly be frightened thinking a convoy is going through their community and somehow there's a hazard. And I think people should really look at the track record of our Ministry of Defence in moving these weapons across the country and know that there hasn't been a single incident in all those years that they've been moving around.
In fact, there have been at least 4 accidents and numerous breakdowns. None are known to have resulted in a release of radioactivity. In one accident, in Wiltshire in 1987, a warhead carrier slid off the road and rolled over. In another, in Somerset in 1988, a motorist was killed in a collision with a carrier. The Ministry of Defence say,
all plausible accident scenarios are addressed, and the containers in which our warheads are always transported are designed and tested to resist accident effects, such as severe impact and prolonged fire.
I asked the author of a report on nuclear weapons transportation how he assessed the risk.
It's a two-sided equation. On one side, you've got the Ministry of Defence and it's very specially designed lorries, and it's very specially trained people, the armed servicemen, the outriders, the drivers. They all know what they're doing. On the other side of the equation, you've got all these road hogs running up and down the motorway. There's two extremes of accident could occur to a convoy, say, on a motorway. And the worst one, of course, is when the motorway is involved in one of those terrible pile-ups and there's a fire. If you had a major fire or an accident, the plutonium from a nuclear weapon would disperse.
A US government report, chaired by Professor Drell, found that a full-scale nuclear explosion, though unlikely, was not out of the question.
The Americans have said that their Trident warheads are prone to accidental nuclear detonation. One imagines, because they've got the same flight characteristics, the same re-entry characteristics, the British Trident weapon must also be at risk of accidental nuclear explosion.
The Ministry of Defence say,
The nuclear warheads in the current UK stockpile are of UK design, and we have every confidence in their safety.
I think an American professor is really very far removed for our own arrangements in this country. I think he's going into a scaremongering tactic.
The committee that reported to the House of Representatives in America said it was possible, in fact they said it was probable if it was a severe accident. Now, quite frankly, if I'm to compare the secrecy of the Ministry of Defence against the relative openness of the Americans, I think I'll take the Americans' word for it, quite frankly.
even though we were acting lawfully while filming this item, we were stopped 8 times under various pretexts, including the Road Traffic Act, the Official Secrets Act, and even the Prevention of Terrorism Act. At one stage, soldiers trained their guns on us. You might think that all this is justified. After all, we are talking about the defence of the realm. But we do pay a heavy price for what many think is secrecy taken to the extreme. Local authorities and others have insisted that they need more information on what to do in the event of an accident involving nuclear warheads. Last December, the Home Office finally issued guidelines. These guidelines actually admit that an accident could involve the release of plutonium. A piece, smaller than a pinhead, could kill you if it got inside you. It's now 2:30. The convoy is passing through the centre of Glasgow. I asked the man charged with informing the public of a radiation emergency whether he felt the new guidelines could be implemented.
The magnitude of the hazard that's posed really took us by surprise. There would be fine particles of plutonium scattered into the atmosphere and carried off-site, downwind, out to 5 kilometres. And our problem is simply we do not have the capability to immediately attract the attention of 60,000 people in the downwind sector. So I feel at the moment no local authority in the United Kingdom has the resources to cope with an accident of that scale and magnitude.
If you had a major fire or an accident, the plutonium from a nuclear weapon would disperse. The dispersion of plutonium and the risk, the implicit health risk, goes on for years, tens of years, hundreds of years, and thousands of years. So once it's out the bag, and it's in the environment, then people are at risk for perpetuity.
It's 5 p.m. The convoy's nearing the end of its journey to Faz Lane. As it slows to negotiate a tight bend in Dumbarton, a group of protesters brought the convoy to a halt. 10 arrests were made for breach of the peace.
I think this is a disgrace that the convoy should be allowed to come through an area like ourselves, you know what I mean?
Don't obstruct me, sir. Don't obstruct me.
Does it worry you that nuclear
Not really, because they go by and we don't know they're going by.
Okay.
But maybe if you're to sit and think about it, who knows?
This is a complete waste of taxpayers' money, in my opinion. Complete waste. There's kids dying in Bosnia. There's a war going on all over the world, and yet we're spending all this money These policemen have been taken off other duties to be here today to look after these weapons of mass destruction.
At 6 o'clock, the convoy reaches its destination, Faslane Nuclear Submarine Base on the west coast of Scotland, to deliver its cargo of refurbished nuclear weapons. There is no real way the danger can be minimised. Whatever way nuclear weapons are transported, by road, rail, air or sea, the risks will be about the same. Nuclear weapons are inherently dangerous. You might be prepared to run the admittedly small risk of making Tyneside uninhabitable or even removing Glasgow from the map, all for the sake of strong defence. But who are we defending ourselves from? The Cold War is over, the Reds don't exist, and nuclear weapons technically can't defend us from third world dictatorships. British nuclear weapons are more of a hazard to British people than to anyone else.
Keep tuned to this station. Emergency services and military forces are responding to the accident. You will be informed when these precautions are no longer necessary. This is the end of the warning.